What if I told you that you can save your knight? But you're gonna have to find the most ridiculous move that you have ever played.
Hey guys, so I discovered this truly bizarre opening which I want to share with you today. But let me tell you the whole story. I've been playing chess for almost 2 years now, and the majority of this time I've been just playing gambits. So for example, against d4 I always play pawn to e5 going for the Charlie gambit, which is a little bit dubious. And that's why recently I just made my mind that I want to find a new opening which is not as dubious, but I wanted to keep it like a sideline. So, trying to get my opponents out of their preparations early because I think that's beneficial. So I've been searching for a nice reply to d4 and I really enjoyed this knight to c6 idea. And what caught my eye was that if they push pawn to d5, you can go knight to e5, and here e4 is the most played move, you can go e6, and then f4 is the most played move. And in this position, you can just sacrifice your knight entirely and just grab this pawn, and they can capture your knight. Yeah, and believe it or not, but this is more sound than the Charlie Gambit. It's known as the Mikenas or the Bogoljubov defense, but this is not what I want to talk about today. This is just to illustrate why I decided to go for this knight to c6 as move 1 for black. But in reality, the most common way to continue for white here is to play pawn to c4, going for some kind of queen's gambit structure. And here I decided I would play knight to f6. This is known as the black's knight tango or the Mexican defense. It has more names. And here in this position, knight to c3 is the natural continuation for white. And after that, black can decide what to do. And I just made a little bit of research on YouTube and I've noticed there is a lecture by Jonathan Schranz. There is the chess butcher explaining this opening for like 2 hours stuff like that, and everybody is talking about pawn to e5. So I was like, meh, too mainstream to find new content, let me find something else, and I went for the second move, which is pawn to d5, and it is in this position. If your opponent goes for bishop to g5, which is one of the most common replies, here you have an option to go for knight to e4. And this is what I call the Morpheus defense. By the way, if you want to avoid all the nonsense with the knight to c6 as your first move, you can happily just play, I don't know, pawn to d5, and you are very likely to get the same thing with a different move order. There is like a bunch of move orders that lead to this same position, but let's just focus now on the Morpheus defense. Alright, so knight to e4 in this position. We are hitting this bishop, and already this is very interesting, and believe it or not, but the best way to continue for white, you wouldn't find it if you wanted to, but it is to simply push pawn to e3. Now nobody plays this, which is good. I even checked the Masters database and there are like 23 games that reach this position, and only one dude from the Masters actually played pawn to e3. Everybody else seems to be capturing this knight, that looks like the most natural move. Yeah, but the thing is that pawn to e3 is best for white, and we don't even want to capture this free bishop, because if we do, then white can capture here, threatening our knight, and we don't even have a time to save this knight, because if we just try to move it, I don't know, even back here, then simply pawn to h4 traps our knight, and the position is going to be better for white. But luckily nobody is playing this pawn to e3 nonsense. Everybody seems to be just grabbing the knight because it was threatening the bishop, and chess players in general, they love their bishops. So here we are going to recapture this knight, and in this position there are only two variations which you will have to learn. The first one and the critical one is pawn to d5, which will lead to equal endgame. And then the second move is pawn to e3, which is already slightly better for black. So let's first start with pawn to d5. And now we reach the position from the intro, and well, our knight is hanging. And there is one correct way to save it, but it is like the most ridiculous move that you can play in this position. So feel free to have a look around, pause the video, try to figure it out. And let me just tell you that it is not moving the knight out of the way, which could be playable, but it's already better for white. So you need to find the best move, and the best move is pawn to e6. So hanging your queen instead. Yeah, that's the way to protect the knight. Because if they capture the queen, well, which is what they should do, here you are going to play bishop to b4 check, and the only way is to give the queen right back. So we capture their queen, they recapture, and here we save the knight by capturing the bishop on d8. So this is the funniest opening that I have seen so far. Maybe not, but it is funny. Let's go back and let's see this crazy position one more time in slow motion. So what if they don't capture the queen? Because I believe there will be those smartasses saying that, well, you are voluntarily hanging your queen, there is something fishy about it, so let me just grab this knight. Well, this is losing for white, because here we are going to just capture the bishop. And actually most people here follow it up with pawn captures on b7, and this is just checkmate, like this. So that's not playable for white. No, they need to accept our queen sacrifice. So this is the soundest, boldest gambit that you can get. So they need to capture it, and they need to go through this line. And this is just an equal endgame. The ideas are that white should continue with pawn to e3 to, develop the light square bishop. And then we should go something like bishop here, pawn to f5, pawn to c6 is the option. Well, you figure it out. The engine is saying that this is just equal endgame. Which is, in my opinion, it is an opening success for black. Alright guys, let's go back and let's have a look at the other variation, which is if they don't play pawn to d5, but pawn to e3. So pawn to e3, but this is already slightly better for black, and actually white needs to be really careful not to get into trouble very, very quickly. Because here we are going to continue with pawn to f6, harassing this bishop, which is, by the way, locked inside this little area. Poor bishop. And in this position, they actually have to once again play pawn to d5. Otherwise, they can get into really nasty trouble. So, for example, if they play bishop to f4 here, this is already a losing blunder. Here we can hit them with pawn to e5, attacking the bishop. So let's say they capture. Now we throw in an in-between move, bishop to b4 check. We lurk out the king to e2, and we continue with bishop to e6. So we are aiming for this pawn, which is potentially checkmate in two moves. So white needs to react to this, and the engine is saying that they should play something like pawn to f3 to give some room to this king, but I think more human way to deal with this would to play pawn to b3, trying to solidify this structure. But in this case, we could continue with pawn captures on e5, hitting the bishop once again. They could exchange the queens, but let's have a look at that later. Let's say that they would just back up with their bishop. Here we can continue with queen to f6. not allowing a queen trade, and also our plan is to deliver this check with queen to b2, which we cannot do right away, but don't worry, we will get there. So what they should do here is, I think the best move is to push a3 and try to harass our bishop away. But we don't care, we are going to hit them with bishop b4, I mean g4 check, so they can block it, we can capture with the pawn, they can recapture, and even though both of our bishops are hanging, we are going to push pawn to e4. And with this move, we are boxing in the king on the second rank, and we are allowing our queen to come to b2. So what should they do here? I mean, which bishop to capture? Well, if they capture the light square bishop, then queen to b2 check, and this is checkmate in 2 moves, because now they can only block this with the queen, and it doesn't matter from which square, because then it is going to be checkmate anyways. So they cannot capture the light square bishop. What if they capture the dark square bishop instead? Well, in this case, we are going to continue with pawn captures on f3. Now the king needs to go and block this pawn. If the king would wander this way, well, there is just this. And if the king would walk up, then there is check, and this is hanging. So the king goes to f2, but here comes our queen to b2 with check. So let's say they try blocking with their knight, we capture this, well, they still have the bishop, but here comes our rook to d8, hitting the queen, and well, here they could try to, counter attack our queen, but we could go queen to f6 check and pick up this queen next turn. And if they decide to just move their queen out of the danger, then, well, they need to stay in touch with this bishop because it is already attacked twice. So let's say queen would go to e1, but here our rook just comes to the second rank, and this is game over. Okay, let's rewind this attack. And I mentioned there is a line where they exchange queens. So let's just see this one more time. So they went for the e3 variation. We kicked their bishop away, but they didn't play the correct move. They moved the bishop to f4. Here pawn to e5 to attack the bishop. If they capture, in between move, bishop to b4 check, king moves, and here bishop to e6, attacking the pawn, right? So let's say they protect it with b3, and here we can continue with pawn captures on e5. Well, the queens are staring at each other, so let's say they would capture our queen, we can recapture with the rook, and since their bishop is under attack, let's say they would bring it back to g3. Here we can continue with bishop to g4 check, so they block this, and we deliver another check with the rook to d2. This way we force the king to go to e1, where it will get hit with this coward check from our bishop. And in this case we are just simply going to capture this rook for free with another check, also threatening the unprotected bishop. So let's say king to e2. We give another check, so the king is just dancing around for a while. And after that we can follow it up with castling. And now they can't even capture this bishop because it's a forced checkmate. And if they play anything else, it is anyways forced checkmate. Alright guys, let's go back. And let's see what happens if they play this correctly. So just to remind you what happened, we played this opening, they played bishop to g5, and this gives us the opportunity to go for Morpheus defense with knight to e4. Most people here capture the knight, we recapture, and in this position most people play pawn to e3. So we can continue with pawn to f6, harassing the bishop. And what if they play the correct move here, and that is pawn to d5? Well, in this case, we are still going to continue with pawn to e5. At this point they should capture our knight, but we are not even going to capture their bishop. You see, we are going to finish them off being one piece down. Because in reality, this bishop of theirs is just a prisoner of the left side of the board, not participating much in this game. So they captured our knight. We are going to go for bishop b4 check. Once again, making their king move to e2, and we still go bishop to e6. So pretty much all the same ideas are here as well as just we have been exploring in the previous variations. So we are now hitting this pawn, and what they should do, what they have to do, and what their only option to survive this is to push this f pawn. But are they going to play this? I'm not sure. If they play that, I'm sorry, you're going to have to win this game being in a just slightly better position. But let's just explore the wrongness of them trying to protect this pawn or maybe exchanging queens. So let's start with having a look at what happens if they decide to exchange queens at this position. Well, we are of course going to recapture with the rook, and now notice this would be checkmate, so they need to do something about it. And let's say they would just play pawn to b3. Well, now we are going to continue with rook to d2 check, and this is the same problem as they had before. Their king is forced into the line of sight of our bishop, and we are going to give this discard check, win the rook, and well, we are threatening to win the bishop as well, and they cannot save it because this is checkmate, curtains closed. Please excuse the noises in the background. My 2-year-old son just woke up and is probably trying to make the sounds of the dying white king. So we need to quickly finish this. So that was the queen exchange variations. And let's have a look what happens if they just simply go pawn to b3. Well, in this case we are first going to go queen to e7, not to allow the queen exchange. And here, well, if they will try to protect their hanging bishop and move it to h4, they are done. We are going to go rook to d8. Now the best square for their queen is to go queen to c2, which walks into rook to d2 check, winning the queen and ending up in a position which is about -5 for black. By the way, if you are wondering why queen to c2 is the best square, well, if they try some other square, let's say queen to c1, then queen to d6 is a very strong reply threatening this, which is a checkmate. And yeah, well guys, that would be it for this Morpheus defense. Right now I have to go. Thanks for watching. See you later. Have fun. Take care. Bye bye. Bye.